try and I should get
Hello there, welcome to episode 29 of Little Big Knits. This is a podcast about knitting primarily. My name is Selma. I'm coming to you from Ottawa here in Canada, where I live with my husband, who's making noise in the kitchen at this very moment, my two children who are still up in their beds, and our cat Yoda, who doesn't pay any attention to us now that it's summertime. So welcome if you're new, and thank you for joining me again if you're here again. We have a Ravelry group called Little Big Knits where you will find the show notes for each episode, as well as an introductions thread. Our knit-alongs are there, so please come and join if you are so inclined. So today I've got some finished objects for you, as well as one work in progress, and a lot has happened in the last month, so I will share that with you towards the end of the episode. But the introduction was taken, the imagery was taken during the time that Kate was here, Kate of Hawthorne Cottage Craft. You'll recall from the last episode that I mentioned that she would be coming to visit during the last week of June. And on my birthday, we celebrated by starting the day with a walk hike at an area in the Gatineau Hills here called Pink Lake. So that footage is from there. And I'll be leaving you at the end of the podcast with all kinds of footage from the last month as well. And I'll tell you all about the last month at the end of the podcast. So I think that just about wraps up the introduction. Let's start. Actually, I realized that I kind of lied, that doesn't quite wrap up the introduction. I wanted to mention that we have the Garment Galore Cal going on right now. This is a knit-along, crochet-along for knitted or crocheted garments, so clothing such as sweaters or skirts or dresses, shorts, cardigans, anything that we wear on our torso to clothe ourselves. And I'm co-hosting this with Kate of the Hawthorne Cottage Craft podcast. And it's a year-long knit-along. If you've been joining in, you know what it's all about. If you haven't, feel free to come to my Ravelry group or to Kate's Ravelry group and check it out if you're interested in joining in. It's year-long. It's going until the end of December. You can join in whenever, and you can knit as many garments during this period as you like. We have different finished object threads that you can explore as well. And also, one thing I didn't mention last time, but it was actually our podiversary. I started this podcast, I think it was the 12th or the 17th of June, 2 years ago. So happy podiversary. If you've been here since the beginning, happy podiversary to you too. Thank you so much for joining me for all these different episodes, 29 in total. And I've just really enjoyed podcasting, which I've said before. It's nice to connect with people in this way. It's nice to share what I'm making in this way and building community. And we've had some lovely conversation on Instagram as well as on Ravelry. So thank you for the last 2 years, and I plan to continue podcasting again, about once a month usually. It's unlikely to happen more often than that. I try to podcast when there is some free time, when I feel like I've got something to share, and it's really important for me not to turn it into something that's very routine, because I really struggle with things as soon as they become an obligation. So I try to really not turn it into an obligation for myself so that I can continue to enjoy, because I really do enjoy doing it. But it's kind of like making kids lunches. Every time you know that you have to do it, it just kind of I really don't enjoy making them. I'm not very good with routine. So there you go. But I've really, really enjoyed these last 2 years a lot. So, oh, and the last thing that I wanted to mention was that there were a lot of comments last time, and thank you for all the comments of all different types. There were also some comments about Scandinavian designs and the ANKER'S design, because I had shared some of my less positive thoughts about the designing of that pattern, and so I really appreciate everyone's comments around that, and if you're interested in going to see them, you can go back to the last episode and read through the YouTube comments. But thank you very much. So let's get on to knitting. All right, so then the children woke up, so I had to take a little break just before the FOs, just before we're getting into the meat of things. So anyway, that's all right. This might end up being one of those discombobulated podcasts, or at least I end up feeling like it's discombobulated. So anyway, on to finished objects. And well, actually, I guess first I'm going to talk a little bit about what I'm wearing. This is a Vogue knitting pattern that was made in the late 90s, so about 20 years ago. And it comes from a Vogue knitting magazine from the time, which is in 1996. So this is the spring-summer edition of Vogue knitting, and it is pattern number 7. There you go. I've got a bit more meat than this woman does, so it fits on me a little bit differently. But my mother made this in around that time. She made one for herself, and she made one then for me. So we each had one, and hers, I have to say, she wore it so much that it kind of, it sort of died along the way. Not too long ago, actually, I think last year. And whereas I didn't wear mine for quite a while, but I've been wearing it again. And I've been wearing it again for a variety of reasons, partly because fashion has changed again. And this, as you can see, and I'll show it to you soon, this, as you can see in the picture, is a little bit of a crop top. It's a shorter top. And those types of tops are back in, but also for a period of time, all pants were very low-waisted, and I just wasn't going to do that because I wasn't going to bare my belly to the world. But this is what it looks like. I'll stand up so you can see. I tend to wear it with these. I have a pair of black pants and a pair of these sort of blue pants that are kind of a higher waisted pant, and I just wear it with that. It's just a very nice summer top. It is made out of, I would say, a lace weight, very fine crochet cotton, mercerized crochet cotton, I'm assuming. It's certainly a mercerized cotton. It's got a really crisp feel to it, and then it was, you know, that just the little trim was done in a different color. And it is very nice to wear because it is quite light. It's thin. It's a very light cotton, and it's just a nice fitting sweater. So I've really been enjoying it. This edition of the Vogue knitting, I kept it when I was cleaning out my mother's house because I remembered that the sweater was in here. But there are some other kind of neat tops. Like I quite like this one here, which is a bit like a short sleeved cardigan that I was sort of looking at, and I thought that could be kind of a neat little thing. There's a really nice striped sweater in here. And actually, there is something that I made from here as well, which we use here in the house. I made this pillow with this motif on it. There was also a throw, but I made the pillow that's kind of in a cream color, and honestly I just didn't bother to look for it, but it is a pillow that we have used over the years. So I made that about 20 years ago, I think, because I was living in Montreal when I was knitting on that. I remember it was my first year living in Montreal, and I moved to Montreal in 1998, so I might have made it the year later. I probably borrowed this from my mother and then gave it back to her. So this was a very used Vogue knitting. I don't think my mom made anything else out of here. However, she did make just about something from every Vogue knitting that came out at that time. Of course, there wasn't social media, and so I'm just looking. There's a really cute dress in here. Look at that. Isn't that lovely? Really pretty. There was no social media. You know, you got your patterns from booklets, from books, or from magazines that were being sold in shops. And magazine shops are kind of something that I used to love going to, and they are becoming less and less frequently found. There just aren't that many anymore. So people really do get most of their patterns online. But my mother would buy Vogue Knitting pretty much every time. That was really the main magazine. I think Interweave might have started a little bit later, or around 2000, around the late 90s. So she would buy that sometimes as well. And she made something all the time, pretty much. And it's unfortunate because I didn't find that many of her knits when I cleaned out her house last year. She does have one sweater that she still wears, so I may show it at some point. And there are some older knits, but I didn't find a lot of the more contemporary things that she had made. She probably used them, and then eventually they frayed or got really old or whatever. So there you go. That's the first thing I want to share with you today. I'm also drinking a cold tea today because it's really hot. We've been having quite the heat now. We had a cool spring. We were able to wear our woolies for a long time, and now it's really hot. And so I'm drinking this tea, which is called Sweet Pear Punch. It's by Tealish in Toronto. I think I mentioned them to you in another episode. And I made this last night as a warm tea, and I'm drinking the leftovers today as a cold tea. So the next FOs I finished the socks by TRACIE MILLAR. These are the Georgia socks, and I finished them up. Now I'm just noticing that my change of color here is really not very good. It worked out much better on the other sock, so I'm not quite sure what I was doing on this first sock, that it's quite noticeable where I did that. I talked to you about these socks last time. These were super duper fun to make, I have to say. And I've got them on these wonderful sock blockers this time. I was a better podcaster that are by Patricia, who's P4Chen, and she's got the knitography website and she makes these from birch that are on her farm. Really, really beautiful. These are just stunning, stunning sock blockers. So these socks by TRACIE MILLAR of the Grocery Girls were oodles of fun to make, and I'm actually thinking I'm going to make another pair, and primarily because these ones ended up too big for me. I am so used to making my socks toe up, and have really gotten into a routine of making them that way, that sizing is almost always just right, and making them cuff down and having a cut-in heel I think kind of threw me off for sizing a little bit. So I'll know for next time, but I am thinking about making another pair. I've got tons of this left, and I was actually thinking of, and it's actually subtly striped, this yarn, so I was thinking of just making a one color sock, or maybe adding the striping just in the heel and the toe. But I really enjoyed making these socks, so I'd like to make them again. I really enjoyed making the cut-in heel. That was really fun. And I also Kitchener stitched 4 times on these socks, because once here and once here on each pair. And by the end of it, I was really much more proficient and comfortable with it, which is why I really didn't like it. I just never found it a comfortable thing. So that was great too. I got used to doing the Kitchener stitch, so I don't hate it anymore. Thank you, TRACIE. So anyway, lovely, lovely pattern. I think I talked to you guys about the yarn last time. I don't even remember what they are now, so you'll have to refer to the last episode. But I wanted to show these to you. They were almost finished, I think, the last time, or I was partway through the second sock. So there you go. Super duper fun. I was knitting those on 2.25 millimeter needles. I'm just going to put them over there. The other thing that I finished last time was the ANKER'S sweater, which is right here. And I'm kind of thinking that maybe I should try this on for you. So let's just stop here for a moment, and I'll be back in a matter of a second. Ta-da! here I am now in the ANKER'S sweater. So I was almost finished this sweater the last time I spoke to you guys. This is a sweater that is made, designed by PETIT Knits. I reviewed the pattern last time, and despite my, less favorable review of that pattern, I think I'll probably end up making this again. I really, really love the design of it, and once you have a little bit of experience making, top-down sweaters especially, it's really quite easy to modify. And so I'll just quickly review what happened last time, was that by the time I got to the end of the yoke repeats and I separated for the sleeves, I realized that it was just too tight around the torso for what I was looking for. So I ripped back to the last ribbing section here, and I actually just added another row of increases. As you added increases, there was a little increase in the number of stitch between each increase, so I just kind of followed that rhythm and went along. And then when I separated for the sleeves, I really did it to the number of stitches that there would have been in the pattern, because I wanted the sleeves to be a little bit snug. I wanted the looseness to come from the body. So I ended up finishing it. I'm really happy. I've worn it. I really enjoy wearing it with this sort of white pencil skirt that I have, because it's got just enough of, positive ease. It doesn't go terribly well with these pants, but it's got a nice positive ease. And it's, it's a little bit shorter, so it's got a little bit of that look that is happening a lot today with the ranunculus and other sweaters like the Ursa by Jacqueline Cieslak and so forth. But it's just really, really great. I'd say the one thing about the cotton that I used, the butterfly cotton number 16 that my friend Sue had brought me from Greece as a gift, and I double stranded that with some leftover Holst yarn that I have. And the sweater's got a little bit of a memory, so when it gets a fold in it, it sort of stays there a bit. Like you can see my fold lines quite a bit, and I find when I sit it gets creases, and then when I stand those creases are still there. But I think that's a bit of the nature of cotton, that it has a little bit of memory like that. But I'm really happy with the sleeve length, and I just really, really happy with this sweater. So there you go. Despite my reservations about the details in the pattern, I was able to modify it to make it work for what I was looking for. And yeah, I think this yoke is really flattering, and so I'll be making another one at some point. I actually thought about making another one in linen. I think I won't, but I wouldn't mind having a woolly one for the winter, for example, with longer sleeves, so we'll see. So those are my two finished objects for today. And while I'm remembering, I wanted to mention this cuff that I'm wearing. I'm going to put the name of the store down here, because this was a gift from my friend Sue for my birthday, and it's a leather cuff that can be used as for your wrist, but it can also be used as a shawl cuff to clasp a shawl together so that it holds it in place. We'll see if I ever use it that way, I don't know, but I really enjoy wearing it. It's really great. Thank you, Sue. So I'll put the store down where I'll ask her and put it down, because I think she got it on Etsy. So the next thing I wanted to mention is what I'm working on. So I'm looking down at my notes. So I'm really only working on one thing, and I think I didn't even mention this last time, did I? I think I may have mentioned that after finishing the ANKER'S that I was probably going to cast on the FARALLON. And the FARALLON is ready to go in this bag by TRACIE of Bags She Built. I really like this bag that TRACIE gave me a while ago. And she has an Etsy shop, by the way, so if you want to check it out. She makes bags out of vintage tablecloths, and so it's just got a really wonderful, wonderful feel to it. So I was going to make the FARALLON, which is, unfortunately I photocopied this or printed this out in black and white, so you really can't see. But it's a wonderful design by Elizabeth Doherty of Blue Bee Studios, and I was going to make it in this gray linen, Katia linen, that I thought I didn't have enough, and then I realized that I did. However, when I looked at the cast on for this sweater, it was a little bit complicated, and I was just, when I finished this, I was just about to be leaving for Toronto, and I needed a fast, easy cast on. I wanted to have something new for the trip, and so I decided to put that off and start something else. So this is waiting to get cast on. And I ended up starting something that is at this point in this bag. It was in one of my bags by Paradise Islands before, but then it outgrew that. And I don't think I showed this to you last time. No, I don't think I did. So I decided to cast this on, which is the CALYX by Elizabeth Doherty as well, of Blue Bee Studios. And this had a far simpler cast on. But what's interesting about this sweater, aside from the fact that it's just a really lovely sweater, is that it had a crochet cast on at the bottom, because it's a bottom up sweater. And I've realized from reading her instructions for crochet cast-ons, for provisional cast-on using the crochet method, that she used a different method, and I think she uses a method that's probably fairly widely used that I had never used before. So I really, really appreciated learning this, because I didn't enjoy doing crochet cast-ons because my method of doing them was kind of a little bit irritating. I would actually crochet the number of stitches that I needed, or a few extra, and then pick up through through the little loop on the crochet, on each crochet stitch. So it was a bit, I don't know, kind of long and a little bit tedious to do, whereas this this was just very efficient. So she used a very efficient system where you use a crochet hook and a knitting needle at the same time. And I've learned since then that everybody seems to use that method except for me. So this is the CALYX, as I mentioned already. I'm also using, I'll just mention that, the Katia linen, the same yarn as I'm going to use for the FARALLON, but this is more of an oatmeal color, and this is a 50-50 cotton linen blend. Let me just make sure. Yeah, well, 53 cotton, 53 cotton, 47 linen, but essentially 50-50. It's a really, really nice feeling yarn. I really like it. And I'm getting very close to the end. So I finished the first sleeve, and I'm just about finished the second sleeve. As I said, it's a bottom-up construction. I made the torso a tiny bit longer because I felt that it was going to be short. I have to say that I think I probably could have gone up a size, but I decided that I'm going to block the beep out of this thing, and it's going to fit me the way I wanted it, because I want it to be loose, and at this point it just fits. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to get a little bit of ease. I probably could have gone up a size. I decided to use a smaller needle than originally intended. It's supposed to have a 4.5. I decided to go with a 4, and I am happy about that because I like the fabric that it's made, but somehow I think I probably could have gone up a sweater size. It's got a very interesting technique for adding on the sleeves here, which I won't say too much about, but it was quite interesting. A little bit fiddly, I'd say, but really effective. And it's been a really great sweater. So once I finish the sleeve, which has an I-cord edging on it, and that's all that's left to do on the sleeve, is to do the I-cord, then I'll be casting on for the neckband. And another new technique that will be there is it uses a Latvian braid. So you actually pick up and then do a Latvian braid. I've never done one. Elizabeth Doherty provides amazing tutorials for her different techniques. So she had a video tutorial for the crochet cast on. She's got one for the Latvian braid as well. So I'm really looking forward to do it. I already watched it once, got an idea of how it's supposed to be done, and then once I'm actually going to do it, I'll watch the video again. And then there's sort of a rounded neck of ribbing, 2x2 ribbing. And then I think I'll probably block it before I do the I-cord edging on here. And if I realize that the length is not right after I've blocked it, it's too short because I've been trying to widen it, then I might do ribbing at the bottom that will mirror the ribbing at the top rather than the I-cord edge. If I realize that the length is fine, then I'll probably just do the I-cord edge. So the next time I podcast, this will definitely be finished. and I will have cast on something else. So this was being housed in this bag by Bookhou, by the way, which I just love. I love carrying this around. It's just such a nice bag. It's open, but it's deep enough that, you know, nothing would ever fall out of it. And it's just great. So before I talk to you about anything else, I think I'm going to change because back into the white sweater, because this sweater, it's only got a teeny weeny bit of wool in it, but it's too warm. So I can't wear this sweater when it's 28 degrees like it's going to be today. This week we had one day where it was only going to be a high of 24, and I wore it that day and it was perfectly nice. But as soon as the humidity starts building up, which tends to happen here in Ottawa, and it starts getting really hot, this is just too warm. So back in a flash. There we go. I'm all fresh again. So I will tell you a little bit about what I've been swatching as well, but before I do that, I wanted to tell you about the food thread. In our Ravelry group, I mentioned last time a little bit about having a lot of fun with baking bread lately and just making food, and I thought I would open a food thread and share. So that's been going on, and there's been some discussion in there. I have continued posting when I make something, so feel free to come and check it out and contribute if you're in the mood to do so. I've been enjoying seeing what people have contributed, and there's been a couple of really beautiful pictures, and so yeah, that's been really fun. So once I finish the CALYX sweater that I just showed you, which hopefully will happen in the next couple of days, I have been trying to figure out what to make next. So one option is the FARALLON, and I think I'm going to really try and get that going because I do really want this cardigan, and I'm sure it's going to be a nice knit. It was just that the starting of it was a little complicated for travel knitting, and I didn't have a lot of time. I just needed to cast something on. I've also been swatching in this little bento bag that my friend gave me. Friend Liz gave this to me for my birthday. She made it, so it's a very cute little bag like that. And I showed you guys some linen at some point. I was swatching for a striped top using this linen, which you can see is very cream colored compared to the white of this sweater. And when I was swatching it with some other colors, you'll remember from a couple of episodes back, I just really didn't like it. And it became, next to the brown and the pink, it became even more yellow. And there was something about it that just didn't really speak to me. It looked nice, it just didn't speak to me. And I thought, well, I've got two skeins of this, and this is the Yarn Stories Lithuanian linen that my friend Dana had given to me. So it's a good, you know, about 400 yards each, so it's a good 800. My ANKER'S sweater took probably about 800. Sorry, it's inside out, but this took probably about 800 yards. So I know that I can make a top with about 800 yards. So I decided to swatch with it, but I decided that this was going to be too thin because I have swatched with it on its own before, and I was like, it's just too thin. I didn't like it. So I have a whole bunch of this, actually. I think I have it here. Excuse me. This is actually a weaving linen that comes like this from Finland. It's a lace weight weaving linen, and I have enough of this to put together with this, and they're practically the same color, to create a somewhat thicker fabric. So I have been swatching with this. I first swatched with the two on a 3.25 needle, and I washed this. I added, I was thinking about a top in my head where there would be one row of a purl row. I knit it and I wet it and I blocked it, and I find it a little bit on the stiff side. And that's the thing about linen, is that it has no give. So if you knit it tightly, then what you make won't have any give. It still has drape and it wouldn't be terrible. But I decided to swatch with slightly bigger needles. And so I'm in the process of swatching. I haven't blocked, but immediately, this was a 3.5 down here, and immediately this had a little bit more elasticity, and this has even more, although it is somewhat, you know, transparent or see-through. I think I like that, and the idea was always, when I first got that yarn last year, was to make a layering piece. So I've been contemplating what to make with it. I thought about designing something myself, and I had an idea in my head, and then Jacqueline Cieslak, who is the designer behind the Ursa sweater, which was very popular this late winter spring, I feel. She just came out with a new design called Rift. And I had actually applied to test knit it for her because I thought that's exactly what I want to make. I wasn't chosen for the test knit, but it just came out and I got it for myself. And so I think I'm probably going to use this yarn to make it. It's exactly what I'm looking for. Just, it's going to be a bit of a cropped top, short sleeved, very simple. Hers has some nice details, and I thought I can create my own if I want to, but I think I'll probably make hers because I'm also interested in seeing what kind of design elements people put in their patterns. And so even sometimes if a pattern is easy, if I think it might have some interesting elements, then I like to choose it. I'm very impressed with Elizabeth Doherty's design elements. She really does, even though I said that the shoulder of the CALYX was a little finicky, they're really interesting elements, and I feel like I learned something from it, and I really appreciate that. So I might not buy a super duper simple pattern that will not have anything particularly new for me to learn, because I can perhaps do that myself unless I want the stitch count or something like that. But I have a feeling that Jacqueline Cieslak's pattern is going to be very interesting. It's got some neat details on the side. So anyway, if you're interested, have a look at it. It's called Rift. And we'll see for next podcast if I have cast on the FARALLON sweater by Elizabeth Doherty or the Rift by Jacqueline Cieslak, or something completely different. We'll see, but that's what I'm aiming for at this point. So that really concludes the knitting portion. I thought I would tell you a little bit about some of the acquisitions that have come into my life lately. So I just realized I've got a bag here full of yarn. So June was my birthday month, and a couple of things came into my life. This first one may be a little shocking to you. It was a little shocking to me. But there is a company that is out of Toronto called Americo, and she used to have a storefront on Queen Street West, and then she went only online, and she was having an incredible sale. I have bought yarn from her in the past. I bought a Suri alpaca years ago that I made Alejandro a hat out of, which he lost. And but it was probably, I mean, it's hard to say because I think I say this about alpaca every time, I feel like, but it was probably the nicest alpaca I've ever worked with. It was unbelievable. And I always thought, oh, I should buy a sweater quantity. Well, she no longer carries that, but she decided to have a 50% sale. And so I ended up buying a sweater's quantity of this yarn. I'm going to be making myself a shocking bright terracotta cardigan. She has a pattern called Ruana, I'm pretty sure, and I forgot to bring it down, that I've always admired, and I realized that this was the cardigan this was the yarn to make that cardigan with. So I bought a sweater quantity's worth of this, and I'm hoping to make that. I'm going to be going to Ireland in November or very late October to visit Kate of Hawthorne Cottage Craft and attend her retreat that she's co-hosting with Emma of Woolly Mammoth Fibers. And Kate suggested that I make the cardigan for the retreat. So I'm thinking that might just happen. So we'll see. But this is her baby suri, and it is an 80% baby suri and 20% wool, and it's just got a divine feel to it. So if you are a person like me who has a tendency to like alpaca, this is a stunning, stunning yarn. And with the sale being at 50% off, I just couldn't resist. I also bought some yarn for the podcast as part of the Knit Along prize, but I'll show that to you at another time. Kate arrived with some goodies from Ireland for me. So there were lots of different things, but I'll just show you the knitting related ones. Speaking of woolly mammoth fibers, she brought me this sock set. So this is essentially a 50% BFL and 50% Cheviot wool, and it's meant to be a sock yarn, a natural sock yarn. And I am really, now that I've showed it to you, it might just get wound and I may start a pair of socks. I have been thinking about making a couple of different patterns, one being the Pebble and Pathways by Marceline Smith, Hey Brown Berry, and I think this would be really, really beautiful. I am also thinking about the Lemo socks by Finfrost, by Minna Sorbala. So this is going to become one of those two pairs. We'll see what happens, but I've just been dying to knit socks that are either a little unusual, as the little ankle socks that I made by TRACIE were something different for me, or out of yarn that is something I've never used before, and I've certainly never made non-nylon socks. I'm curious about that. So thank you, Kate. She also brought a set of minis by Fine Fish Yarns in these glorious colors. So I have not been working on my crochet blanket at all, and I'm sort of disappointed in myself, but it just has not been in my sphere of knitting at all, or working on anything at all these days. And I have been thinking that when I finish that one, I would like to make the Northeaster blanket by, oh dear, I cannot remember her name. I'll put it here. Skenanigans, I know, is her name on Instagram. And I was thinking it'd be nice to make it in more subtle colors. So I think that'll be for my next blanket. Really beautiful. And the last thing I want to share with you is this little guy. Is he not the most adorable little guy, or what? I posted on Instagram asking for a name for him, and one of my cousins from Turkey suggested Ramazan, and that just completely, I don't know why, this is Ramazan. Say hello. I feel like he should perform magic tricks. Holly, my friend Holly, made this. She made one for a group of us. Each of us got one, and I don't know if this kit is from Going Gnome, but she has learned to make them from those kits, and I've been thinking about getting one of those kits for myself. But I just, look at this guy. He's got so much personality. I feel like he should be singing and dancing and performing magic tricks. Thank you, Holly. I really like him a lot. And so that's really it for acquisitions as well. I've been trying extremely hard not to buy yarn, and I had thought about getting myself some summer yarns for my birthday, but when I saw that Americo sale, I thought that is going to be my birthday gift to myself that's yarn related. I also got a gift certificate to Wabi Sabi, our local yarn store, but I just haven't been able to decide what I might want to get, so I'm just going to ponder that and sit on that for a while, and I know that it'll eventually come to me. So the next part of this podcast will really be a little bit of chatting time, telling you a little bit about the last month. One thing I thought I would tell you a little bit about is what you may be looking at in the background. I've had people sometimes ask me what is in the background, and I don't know, I guess it never occurs to me to tell you, so I thought I might take a moment to tell you a little bit. I'm going to move the camera slightly so that you can see. This is a painting that I have here on the wall by an artist whose last name is Healy. I can't remember his first name. And I bought that painting a few years ago. I just loved the colors and the peacefulness of it. I just really, really liked it. So that is in that corner, along with some pictures and some glass bowls with some fairy lights in them. And then above my head, I'll put in perhaps a little close-up. You see some pottery. In fact, you see 4 pottery pots, and 3 of those are pots that I made, and one of them is by Alejandro. So a little story for you is that Alejandro and I met in pottery class. We were doing pottery at the time, and we were working with a potter in Montreal whose name is Mahmoud Bagayan. He's of Iranian origin, and these were his glazes, and he had beautiful glazes. And I was very much into swirls, and I was very much into making these little pots. So I actually had a series of little pots that I made. And then before we get to the other pottery pieces, there is also this piece that people have asked me if I have bread on my mantelpiece, but this is actually a piece by a potter. This little guy is a piece of pottery, and he's sort of like he's just resting on this piece of wood, enjoying a summer's day. I cannot remember the name of the potter, but he is from Quebec. And then we've got 2 last pieces here. This is again one of my little pots, and actually probably one of my favorite pottery pieces that I ever made. I just love this piece. The lid works beautifully, and it's just a beautiful piece. And then there's this piece, which is one of Alejandro's, that also has a little lid, and it's full of stuff. And although they're abstract pieces, that image right there really does look like somebody who is flying or dancing. So hopefully this wasn't too awkward, but I just decided to insert a little video of me telling you about that stuff. I did pottery for about 5 years earlier in my life. When I met Alejandro, I had already been doing it for about 3 years at that point, and we've got a lot of pieces around the house that we've both made. And then after I met him, I developed some tendinitis that was quite painful, and doing pottery was just really aggravating it. And then I ended up stopping for a while, and I've never gotten back into it. I really enjoy pottery, and I've considered maybe going back to it, but for now it's just not something that's fitting in my life. But I really enjoy looking at the pieces that we made in those days. So there you go. So the last month, what can I tell you? I think that I podcasted last just before we had Isla's piano recital, which I posted on Instagram. And if you're interested, you can go over to my Selma Knits account on Instagram and have a look at the video of her playing piano. It was also Yaro's 16th birthday, so we celebrated that, and that was great. And actually, we're going to be going tomorrow to Montreal for the day to continue to celebrate his birthday kind of a month later, because he's going to be doing I'm not quite sure what they call it, kind of like a float tank. It's sort of a simulation of what it's like to skydive. There's a place in Montreal where you can do that, and he wanted to do it, so we're going to go and do that and spend the day in Montreal with some friends of ours as well. And then I also went to Toronto, which was awesome. It was really nice to fly into Toronto and spend some time with my friend Dana, who lives there, and we ate in some fabulous restaurants. One little, just a little sort of kind of hole-in-the-wall Syrian place, really lovely flatbreads on Queen Street West, and then we went to a Cuban place on Roncesvalles that was really good for breakfast the next day. I also went to see Patricia of Paradise Island, and she had a gathering with some other local knitters, and that was just really, really nice. And it was a one-night affair. But flying into Toronto with Porter is so great because you just fly right into the middle of the city, and you're at your destination in downtown Toronto within 20 minutes or so. So it was really lovely. And then as soon as I came back, Kate arrived from Ireland, and with her husband and her son, and they were staying at an Airbnb not too far from here, and we did a variety of things together. It was so nice to have them here and to meet them, and she was here for my birthday, and we ended up having a wonderful day out. You saw the footage at the beginning where we went for a hike, and then we went for a fabulous lunch at a restaurant in Chelsea, which is outside of Ottawa on the Quebec side, called Les Fougères. And then we went to the Nordique Spa for the rest of the time, which was lovely. And then while she was here, we also went to see the musical ride by the RCMP, which is kind of a show they put on Canada Day, and they have the show every evening at the RCMP stables here in Ottawa for, I'm not sure if like a week or so before before Canada Day. So you can go on a lovely, early summer evening and see the musical ride. So we did that, which was really fun. And it was just nice spending time together. They came over for dinner and we did some things together. So it was really lovely. Really, really lovely. Thank you so much for your visit, Kate. It really made this year special. This was a year later from last summer, and if you've been around, you'll know that last summer was a bit of an intense summer around here. It was, my father passed away, and he passed away 3 days before my birthday last year, which really made for kind of an unpleasant time. And so this year, having a friend come on around that time just made it so wonderful, and I really felt like 2019 is a different year. For me, this year has been a really lovely, simple year, and I have so appreciated it. So anyway, it was a wonderful time. And then as soon as Kate left, Alejandro and I were on the road and we went to Prince Edward County. I mentioned to you Prince Edward County in the last podcast because I had gone to the Prince Edward County Fiber Festival that they hosted in Picton, which is one of the small towns in that area. That region, I just love that region. Like honestly, I think I'd move there if the chance arose. It's a beautiful area. There's 3 small towns called, first one's Picton, and there's Bloomfield and Wellington, and they are surrounded by wine country and a lot of farms, and it's just and Lake Ontario. There's Sandbanks Provincial Park there, so there's beautiful beaches and you can go swimming, and it's just truly, truly wonderful. And Alejandro and I went and we stayed at a wonderful country house, which was itself on a lake, although not really a swimming lake, more of a canoeing lake. We didn't actually go out canoeing, but we might go there again and do that. And they had just beautiful grounds, and they also had a lovely dog as well as a parakeet. I have never met a bird with as much personality as this parakeet. He was just such a delight. He would follow us around the house and sit on your shoulder and waddle behind you as you went to your room. He was just adorable. And we had a lovely, lovely time there. So that was really, really great. And Isla was off to a friend's cottage, so we were able to take that trip to Prince Edward County, and then she came back, and Alejandro is now off for the month of July, spending it with Isla and Yaro, and it's just been, even though I'm working, it's been a nice relaxed time. A little bit of a different pace with less activities going on and so forth, but so far it's been a lovely, lovely summer. I have not been making bread as I was in the spring, partly because it's gotten hot and there's just been a lot going on. I actually don't want to eat a lot of bread. It doesn't agree terribly well with my stomach. So I have sort of been thinking about, oh my gosh, should I really be making bread? But I really enjoy it. So again, when there's more time, I'll be making more bread. But we have been making kombucha. Somebody had given me a SCOBY, which is a kombucha starter, when I went to the retreat in the States, actually. And so I have been making kombucha, which has been an interesting experiment. My first couple of batches were so-so. Kombucha is essentially a fermented drink that has a combination of bacteria and yeast in it, and it's supposed to be really good for your gut, essentially, and it's tasty as well, except that mine ended up being a little bit imbalanced and overly yeasty, which made it have kind of a bit of a wine-like flavor, and that's not quite what I was looking for. So I've been working to improve on that, and looked up some sites. I just typed in, what do I do if my kombucha is cloudy, and found some tips. So I've been following those and really enjoying making kombucha. And I posted on our food thread in the Ravelry group about some key lime popsicles that we made this week that were really delicious. And so yeah, we've just been experimenting with other things. So that's been really fun. And I've also been listening to some fantastic books. After the last podcast, I finished Something in the Water, which I had mentioned to you. And I just happened to be watching Kristen of Vollenvine, because I watch her every week. And she mentioned listening to Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca. Which I just happened to be thinking about what my next read would be, so that was perfect timing. And I got the audio version read by Anne Massey, I believe, on audible.com of Rebecca, and thoroughly enjoyed that. I really, really enjoyed the book. I enjoyed the story. I enjoyed the writing immensely. It was so great. And then I was looking through my DVD collection, which I inherited from my father, and thought, you know what, he might actually have the movie version, and he did. He had made his own, I guess, from recording off of the television with 2 movies, and he used to have oodles of fun putting together DVD and making covers. He did that for the kids as well with different movies and TV shows. So I'll be watching that pretty soon. And there are actually some little pictures in here from the movie that he, oops, one of them just fell, but of Laurence Olivier and Joan Fontaine. And I can't remember the name of the actress who does Mrs. Danvers. But anyway, so that was made in 1940. The book was written in 1938, and I just really loved that book. I'm hoping to read something else by Daphne du Maurier as well. I think she has one called My Cousin Rachel, which was also made into a movie that I think I might just listen to as well. We're almost finished Trevor Noah. We're listening to it as a family, so it's going a little bit more slowly. And we're going to be going to see Trevor Noah, who is coming to the Just for Laughs Festival. So that's going to be oodles of fun as well. Oodles, oodles, oodles. I feel like I'm saying oodles a lot. Right now, after finishing Daphne du Maurier, I started a book by Gail Honeyman, who is a Scottish writer. I believe it's her first novel, and it's called Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. And this is an interesting book. Actually, it's kind of interesting because she's a kind of an unlikable character in some ways, and yet you really start to like her. And I have to say, listening to Daphne du Maurier, I didn't really like the main character. She got on my nerves at times. I felt like she was somebody that I would lose my patience with at times. So it's interesting reading books sometimes when you don't necessarily love the characters, and it sort of makes you think about what is it that I'm struggling with here, and so it's kind of interesting. Anyway, I'm really enjoying the Eleanor Oliphant book. Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. She is a socially awkward and quite judgmental person who has been through some unfortunate things in her life, which you learn subtly as the story goes along, and it's sort of about her, at this point, what seems to be socialization. I don't actually know what's going to happen in the book at all, so I'm looking forward to seeing what happens, but I'm very much enjoying that. So I think that brings us to the end of the episode. As I said earlier, it's hot, so we are hoping to get out for a swim today. We are supposed to have thunderstorms tonight, but right now we've got a perfectly blue sky, so let's see what happens. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll be going to Montreal tomorrow, and I'm not quite sure what else is on for the rest of the month, but I will tell you when I get back to you next time. Next time I hope to have a finished CALYX, and let's see what else I've got on the needles at that point. Maybe my blanket mojo will come back. I really wish it would. And I'll have the blanket a little closer to being finished. Anyway, until then, I hope this podcast has found you well and you've enjoyed my ramblings, and we'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.